Hello, everyone. We will begin our session soon. And yes, thank you for coming. So I hope you will be seated. Good morning. Today's session, plenary session, is the abolitionist generation, transmission, and innovation. But before we start talking with young youth from all across the globe to share their stories, we want to open this session with a keynote speaker from Dr. Gunther Sauter. He's the Director General for International Order, the United Nations, and also Arms Control for Federal Foreign Office, Germany. Dr. Sauter, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear friends, it's wonderful to see so many of you here in Berlin at the Radialwerk. I would like to open this plenary with the words of a former death row prisoner who happens to be with us here today. Thank you very much for sharing your experience with us and for your work. I quote, "I spent 20 years on death row. Many of those years I was in a cell where I could not even spread my arms out. They would take me out of my cell only 1 hour a day to put me in a cage outside of concrete and steel. Living under the shackle of death, the pressure can crack you. They give people all kind of psychotropic drugs to keep them alive. A good friend of mine died before they could execute him. They needed to force a shot on him once a month. He walked around like a zombie. This person came in the same as me and as you. Death row dehumanizes people." Unquote. Dear friends, in our advocacy against capital punishment, we have to put the voices of those who suffer from it at the center. It is them who can make us all understand what the death penalty actually means and why it is a cruel and inhumane punishment. I have been asked to speak about the role of young activists in abolishing the death penalty, and I see a lot of young activists here with us today. This role is absolutely fundamental. As diplomats, we can promote the abolition of the death penalty in other countries. However, in the end, abolition is a domestic process that has to be driven locally by activists who advocate against the death penalty, by lawyers who represent death row inmates in court, by journalists and by artists who make the death penalty visible. By you. This is why Germany supports civil society organizations in their fight against the death penalty. One important project we funded this year in the framework of the World Congress was ECPM's Abolition Now tour in Morocco, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Kenya, in Indonesia, in Lebanon, and in the United States. In each country, young activists came together to learn about the death penalty, meeting with former death row inmates, and developing their own advocacy projects. In this plenary today, some of these young activists will share their experience, and it's quite impressive. Dear friends, for us as governments, this Congress is a great opportunity to learn from you directly what kind of projects work and what kind of support is needed to bring abolition forward. Based on our engagement, I have a couple of hypotheses on which I would like to hear your perspectives, and I'm sure that the discussion will touch upon this. First point, I think that we have to acknowledge the relevance of different country contexts. Advocating for abolition in the United States is different from advocating for abolition in Belarus, in Zimbabwe, or in China. In particular, we have to come up with creative ways on how to work towards abolition in countries in which the death penalty is used as a tool of political repression with very limited civil spaces to operate in. My second point, I believe we have to focus on forging alliances between more progressive groups and more conservative parties. Many political leaders in non-abolitionist countries are personally in favor of abolishing the death penalty, but they fear that populists may take advantage. Building cross-party alliances can reduce political costs, and civil society plays a crucial role in this endeavor. My third and last point, in many countries, significant parts of the population are actually in favor of the death penalty. This has also been the German experience when the death penalty was abolished in Western Germany in 1949. It was against a majority in the public opinion in the country. This only changed after abolition had become a reality. I believe that no one who has witnessed an execution endorses capital punishment, no matter what the crime has been. Working towards abolition means to communicate just this. Therefore, arts and storytelling have to play a crucial role in our work. Dear friends, I would like to finish my short speech quoting Friday's call of several United Nations special rapporteurs on the Iranian authorities. Stop sentencing peaceful protesters to death. Thank you.
Greetings, everybody. Hello. My name is Trey Legal. I'm from Houston, Texas, in the US of A, heart of the empire. And we're gonna sing, I'm gonna share a song that we learned. My Texas delegation is right here representing, so. And we learned a song in our Abolition Now Tour workshop called Beautiful Noise. It's by Alicia Keys and Brandy Carlisle, I believe her name is. And it's just about using your voice, using your agency, using your advocacy, because we're not gonna abolish the death penalty if we remain silent about it and just be ideologically pure. So we have to get out in the streets, get out, build relationships, build coalitions. And I'm wearing right now, this is a shirt of Mumia Abu-Jamal. He's a political prisoner being held captive in Pennsylvania right now for a crime that he did not commit. And the quote, he used to be on death row, but now he's serving life without parole, I believe, or life sentence in prison. So we demand the release of Mumia Abu-Jamal. We demand the release of all political prisoners. And so I want this song to be a little interactive in the end. Oh, I wanted to say too, this, the quote says, "Many believe it is insane to resist the system, but it is actually insane not to." And excuse the ableism in that. But so I just wanted to say we have to do the work to advocate and abolish the death penalty. So this song is gonna say, now we have a choice, and if our interpreters could help, I want everybody in whatever your native language is to sing it at the end. So it says, now we have a choice, 'cause we have a voice. So I was gonna say, now we have a choice, 'cause we have a voice. If you can sing with me. Now we have a choice, 'cause we have a voice. One more time. Now we have a voice. If you speak French or any languages, just sing it in that language. So that's gonna be at the end. I'm gonna cue you all when we sing that, so I'm gonna just go ahead and begin. Here's Beautiful Noise. I have a voice, started out as a whisper, turned into a scream, made a beautiful noise. shoulder to shoulder marching in the street. When you're all alone, it's a quiet breeze. When you band together, it's a choir of thunder and rain. Now we have a choice, 'cause we have a voice. I'm not willing to die. Stop standing in a wasteland, look me in the eye. Stop living a lie and stand up next to me. You gotta put one foot in front of the other, hand in hand, holding on to each other. Go on and rejoice, 'cause you have a voice. It is loud, it is clear, it is stronger than your fears. It's believing you belong, it's for calling out the wrong. From the silence of my sisters to the violence of my brothers, we can rage against the river, feel the pain of another. I have a voice. I have a voice, and I let it speak for the ones who are not yet really free. It's killing me. No one is saying what we need to hear. I will not let silence win. Now when I see the pain our people are in, there's no other choice, 'cause I have a voice. It is loud, it is clear, it is stronger than your fear. It's believing you belong, it's for calling out the wrong. From the mouths of our mothers to the lips of our sisters, we can dream like our brothers, speaking out like our fathers. We can heal. Can you hear us? Can you hear us now? I have a voice, started out as a whisper, turned into a scream, made a beautiful noise. Shoulder and shoulder marching in the street. When you're all alone, it's a quiet breeze. When you band together, it's a choir of thunder and rain. Now we have a choice, 'cause we have a voice. Everybody now in your language. Now we have a choice, 'cause we have a voice. Again, here we go. Now we have a choice. Now we have a choice, 'cause we have a voice. Thank you all. Let's abolish the death penalty.
Bonjour, Guten Morgen, Selamit Paji, Jambo. Good morning and welcome to the 8th World Congress on the Death Penalty. We are here for the second plenary session, and I want to thank you all for coming and joining us for this conference. I also want to thank Dr. Gunther for the lovely keynote speech that you have given, and just reminding all of us that we have a role to play in abolition, that it is not a one-man job, that we have to come together, the older generation and the younger generation in this fight. My name is Sylvia Morwabe. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and the programs director at Crime Sipoa, which is a youth safety awareness initiative working with the youth in Kenya to bring them out of crime. Today, I will be leading us through this plenary session with my colleague, Kamikara Yubono.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chamikara Yubono. You can call me Cam. It's a long name. And I am currently working for communication solutions for nonprofits, especially in human rights movement across the region of Asia. And I'm also a proud member of the delegation of Abolition Outdoor Indonesia. And we also would like to thank Trey and also the United States delegation of Abolition Outdoor for the performance of a beautiful song earlier titled I Have a Voice. It speaks loudly about our empathy and also our sympathy to the pain of our brothers and sisters who are facing capital punishment and leading us, the young generation, to have a voice that we have a choice now. And also, I speak about Abolition Now Tour earlier, I would like to introduce the program. And it is a program conducted by Ensemble contre la peine de mort in 6 countries across the world, from Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, Lebanon, Morocco, United States, and also Indonesia. It is a 2-day workshop in each country, and we young abolitionists gather around and try to find a solution and also a project that can share and amplify the voices of the abolitionist movement in general. We will also hear from some of them in this session.
Thank you, Cam. So our plenary today is on the new abolitionist generation, so transmission and innovation. And during this session, we will interact with esteemed speakers from all around the world, cutting across different intersectional, intergenerational, and interdimensional sections. So we will hear from their experiences as to how they came into the movement, their challenges, the contributions they made into the movement, and also find sustainable ways to make sure that this movement outlives each one of us in this room. Yesterday we learned that we want to have a planet that one day the death penalty will be something that we talked about as a thing of the past. So today we're going to learn as to how the older and the younger generation can work together to push this movement forward and to bring out complete abolition in the planet.
The message is clear enough. With a universal abolition in sight, it is time for us, the abolitionist movement, to reflect on our foundations and our envision its future. And due to the innovative aspect of the abolitionist movement, we also try to do it in an innovative way. Usually, panel sessions consist of 6 speakers speaking at once, but we want to try different things today. We want to be intimate, so the messages could come across to your heart, and the speakers could share their experiences more intimately to you. So it will be divided into 3 parts, and without further ado, let's start to the first part. We would like to welcome Levang Ngonji and Nina Joy Makina to the stage.
As they come on stage, just a few things about the 2 of them. So we have Leva Ngoji, who is a criminal lawyer and of the Bar of Court of Appeal in Kinshasa, and also a counsel at the International Criminal Court. And he's the president of the Coalition Against the Death Penalty in Congo, and the Coalition of Francophone Africa Against the Death Penalty. And we also have Nina, who is a human rights activist and the team leader for the Abolition Now team from Kenya. Welcome. So to start off in this session, for the first part of this session, we're going to have intergenerational dialogue. We have one who has been in the movement for a very long time, and we have another youth who's just joined the movement. And maybe to just get your experiences, I'll start with Leva. And maybe you can just share with us, what is it that led you to join the abolitionist movement? Do you have a specific time and place or something that just came to your mind that led you to want to be an abolitionist?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde.
And hello, everybody. As this panel is about innovation, I would like to be innovative too. We are here in order to speak about transmission between the older and the younger generation. And my country is part of the 5 countries with abolitional initiatives where young people didn't come to the tour. And so they couldn't get the visa to get here, and that's really a pity. So I think if Yasmin allow me, Agras, Aluciana, Ashadrak, Salomon, and Jonathan,
et à l'aîné d'entrée. Merci beaucoup.
Could be here, it would be much more interesting. I started my abolitionist fight in my country by the end of the 90s. And the DRC is traversing a period of war which has lasted several decades now, and we are still at war. And in 1987, the then power was reversed by a coup militaire, and we created an exceptional jurisdiction which was called the military court with systematic executions, so that in 1987 our country was among the 5 countries who executed the most people in the world. So that was a really revolting experience for me, and I decided to commit myself to the fight against this partial justice and against death penalty. But that was not just by accident. When I was 13 years old, a cousin, a general, a cousin of my father, who was a general at the time, was accused of a military coup, and he was executed. And afterwards, it was clear that it was some error. And that was really a traumatizing experience for me. You could condemn somebody to death for political reasons, even if the person is innocent. So, and that has been my way until today.
Thank you, Leva. I see that it's something that is close to your heart. It's not just something that you started because of the sake of it, but something that was born out of experience and you have kept in the journey to this point. And just, if I may move to Nina with the same question, we see that, Leva, you've been in the movement for almost 30 years now. I don't know how old Nina is, if she was born by the time you were starting this fight against the death penalty. But maybe, Nina, you can share your experience. What is it that led you to join the abolition movement?
Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning to you all. When you talk about the death penalty, I'm not going to lie, I didn't know that it would actually lead me here. I remember the first time I knew about people actually get executed for crimes is when I watched the famous Shawshank Redemption, the movie. And I remember I got so emotional. I think I was 13. And I just told myself, I'm just praying to God that let me just be a voice to such people, because the main character was actually very innocent, and they had to go to a lot of hardships. And when you're 13, the only hardship you get is not being given enough allowance, you know? They give it when you're 13. So I told myself I really wanted to do something about it. And it just grew passionately. I continued watching. For me, I can say my experience has been more on movies that are based on true stories. You get to learn experiences here and there. And then finally, last year, around June, July, a friend of mine just shared a link and told me, there's this thing that is happening. You can try, just try doing it. And I remember I was so nervous because there's a part where they ask you to do a video and say why you're so passionate about it. I think I had like 50 recordings. Every time I record, I cut. And finally, I just submitted. And yeah, that's how my journey started. 1 year down the line, I'm in Berlin. I understand more. I know so many things about the death penalty now, and I don't think I could be ever happier than this.
Thank you. So with just as a follow-up, Nina, from the journey, it's been a year for you, at least, from the time that you actively joined the movement, not from the time you understood what the death penalty was about.
Yeah.
How and where have you been advocating for the death penalty, if at all? Who have you told about, and how has that experience been?
Okay. I was actually telling a friend of mine, I think he's around here, he's a writer, and I'm very good with words. I talk a lot than I can write. So I'm a podcaster. So most of my experiences, most of my thoughts, I put them in voice. So I have a podcast that I run. It's on Spotify, and that's where I try to air out my views. I also start conversations with very random people, and I just ask them, do you know there's a death penalty? And then they're like, what is that? And then I start explaining. So the next time when I go this, maybe it's a shop or something, and then I tell them the same experience. They're like, you're the guy, the death penalty guy. And I'm like, yes, have you committed any crime? They're like, no, I don't want to, something like that. So I think that's how it actually started. And yeah, it's been a year, and yeah.
Going well.
Yeah.
And Leva, 30 years, how have you been advocating for the death penalty, both in DRC and in the other platforms that you have?
Merci beaucoup. Il faut avouer qu'il y a eu le fait d'un concours de circonstances.
It
Je
happened
suis avocat en
by incidents.
1995.
I was starting to work as a lawyer in 1995, and in our country, it's the young
On appelle prodeo ou pro bono,
that are pro
pour
deo
aller
or pro
défendre
bono
les
to
personnes qui
defend
n'ont pas de moyens.
persons that have no financial
Il se
means to pay
trouve
for a
que
lawyer. And that it
la
was
plupart des
by
personnes
coincidence
qui sont
that most of the
poursuivies
persons that
pour,
are
qui
persecuted
risquent la peine de mort
or
sont
that are
des enfants soldats. C'est-à-dire quand la rébellion
they
est
have a
arrivée, on
risk
a
of
recruté
getting
des
the death
enfants,
penalty are
on a intégré
soldiers.
dans l'armée.
They were children, they were
Ils font partie
integrated
des
into
gens
the
qui
army,
sont,
and they
qui
are
risquent la
those
peine de mort.
youngsters
Et donc,
that
je suis désigné
risk
souvent
being
pour les
sentenced to
assister.
death.
Et
And
donc,
so
j'ai
I
vu
was a young lawyer, and I had to
vécu
defend
la
them. And
souffrance
I
de
have
ces
seen
gens.
the
J'ai
suffering of
défendu
these young
d'autres
people.
personnes, notamment un
And so
général
I had
qui avait été
also
poursuivi,
a
condamné à
general
mort parce
who
qu'il n'avait
had
pas obtempéré
been
aux
sentenced to
règles
death
de-
because he
aux
did not
instructions de son
respect
gouverneur et tout.
the rules,
Il y a eu une histoire
etc.
terrible, c'est d'un
But it
enfant,
was terrible to
soldat
see
qui avait
these
18 ans, pas 18 ans,
soldier
16 ans.
children,
Un
16
soir, il y a
years
eu,
old. So one evening,
attentat aux
there
environs
was
de là où il vivait. Et
attack in the
quelqu'un,
part of the town where I lived, and
l'armée est venue à
the
arrêter
army
toute
came
personne qui
and
avait eu
arrested
aux environs,
everybody
sauf que
who
lui, à ce
had been
moment-là
around.
où il y a eu cet attentat, il mangeait avec son chef.
But the person in charge
chef a témoigné
was
que
eating with
quand on a
the
entendu
boss
les
at
coups
that
de feu,
time, and they heard
jeté un jeune homme qui s'appelait Kyungu.
the noise of the guns and the weapons, and we didn't know what was going on, but it was during sort of state of war, and so we had the process, then trial years later, and so his boss had not been arrested, but he himself was not implied but had been sentenced to death. The rule in my country is that someone who is sentenced to death has to ask for being graced by the president. So it's the president can commute the death penalty. So 48 hours after the coup d'etat, this boy was taken to court, and the lawyer asked the state prosecutor, you cannot execute him because we have not received the response of the head of state. And or a heavy refusal of the president of the country. So we haven't had any response. So we used the telephone, we called him up, and we said, well, this young has to be executed, and we're still waiting for the grace. Is it refused? So can you imagine that? So that's the life of someone that is at risk. And we're not even sure that this person called up the president. So and you can't even receive grace by telephone. You need to do that in writing. So they wanted to execute him, and that was already against the law. But the rule is that when you execute a death row prisoner, so then you have first, second, third race against that, and the execution is done and consumed. So this young man is not dead. He said and continued to say that he was innocent, and then the boss was called by the commander, and the things went on. So that was, for me, terrible to see this process and what it was implied. So what happened? 5 years later, other persons were arrested. And then someone said that he was behind this attack. And so there's a prisoner on death row that had been executed, although the person was innocent. So it was my work as a lawyer who said, well, no, I can't support that. This is not possible. This is not just. Justice and judiciary are imperfect, so we have to fight against that. There were no measures in place to fight against that, so I started working in order to fight against the death penalty.
Thank you, Leva. And just from that experience, because you've said at that point it's just the lawyers coming up who want to take the pro bono, have you seen any growth in the abolitionist movement and in how you handle death penalty matters in DRC from the point that you started to today?
Oui, absolument. Le mouvement a évolué.
Yes, the movement has evolved. I went to participate in the first Congress, Ensemble contre la peine de mort, which was organized in 2001 in Strasbourg. I was there, but I was the only one from my country who knew that there was this Congress against death penalty. So we started working, and first time we also had in 2003, the first time this International Day against death penalty. I was told, I have never seen anyone as courageous as you, coming from your country, and you're really full of courage. And that was unknown. So I speak here, we've now built coalitions, we fight against death penalty. So the whole process, the whole movement has evolved. There are now different networks of lawyers, even networks of judges that had never ever heard about this fight against death penalty before. So we have some of them in our delegation, and the movement is growing and growing and growing. And this is extraordinary to see. There is no International Day against death penalty anymore that we celebrate without the implication of the authorities. So even the Minister of Justice said, well, yes, we agree with you, and it's going to evolve. So the movement is growing further and further and has grown over the years. So it is becoming really big, and there are more and more persons that commit themselves to the fight against death penalty, not only journalists, but also from the legal profession, and it is mainly the young people that support this movement even further.
So you have 30 years of experience in this field, and of course throughout the 30 years we have seen many advancements, technology, media, and also new strategies for advocacy. How have the tools that you use to fight for the abolition has evolved, and how do you try to adapt to it?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for the question. I think that internet and the social platforms, social media are very important. We first used the media, so radio, television, and sometimes we had programs, and the education did not really get through. Now with the social media, social networks, it is a totally different situation. And I've also seen that, for example, the lawyers, I told you how I came to that commitment to that fight. If I had not known about any case of death penalty and execution, I would not have joined the meeting. Now we have networks of lawyers, for example. So even those who have never personally met a death row prisoner or have never experienced that, they know about the movement, and this is good facts that they get via the networks. L'affaire Mukwanyan, for example, is one of the cases where we have lawyers that come from different countries. They got together, spoke about the case to plea for inconstitutional character of or the illegality of the death penalty. It's illegal to touch somebody's life. Or we have, for example, the members of parliament. They work in their political parties in the political field, and sometimes they don't agree with us, and the members of parliament cannot really reach out. But in diplomacy, for example, also we have now possibilities, lots of different networks where members of one country can get together or work together with members of another country and work on this struggle against death penalty. So it's the networks that enable people to get into touch with each other. And the world is getting a village. So I am no longer in danger when I work in a village. When I work in this network, I'm also protected. So the authorities are afraid to touch me. If something happens to me, the whole world will know about that, because the world has become a village. And that is the change. So it's the media, the new technologies that have helped a lot to get this struggle on the international agenda, and it's a universal struggle.
So we want to move to the next question, that is talking about more of an intergenerational and transmission from the esteemed as abolitionist movement and also to the young abolitionist movement. So we want to know about how should social networks be used and to collaborate between the two of them. And from Livang, how should social networks from your generation to Nina's generation should be used, and how do you collaborate for the fight of abolition of death penalty?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for that question as well. We have the case of these young people in the Abolition Now tour that have not been able to come here. I told you about them. So we had some ideas, but they came and made them more perfect. For example, we had the Summit of Francophonia, and we invited someone who organized a sketch and talked in a comic way about the situation. So this summit also included the top subject of struggle against death penalty. So someone outside our networks came to participate. And what did the youngsters do? So they put that on the media. So we brought someone in from the outside, and the young people integrate themselves into this instrument, and they spread the information over the internet. So how can we reach out to them even more? The song that we heard in the States is even sung in Congo. And the dances, abolitionist dances, are danced in my country. So even those that are not interested in the death penalty yet, but they see the beauty of the song or the beauty of a dance, and so they are inspired to get involved and spread the message. That's how it works, and that multiplies the effects. So it's a fact of multiplication that is very important, and here we can be very innovative by means of the social media.
So, it is true that the multiplications and amplification is important, and maybe later we could also join in singing and dancing and have fun together with the abolition dance that Livang has mentioned. But moving on to Nina, you have heard from Livang and his advocacy and his experience throughout these years. And of course, we as the young generation have to collaborate with the I want to say old, but I know you're not old, but the previous generation to become one. How do you try to collaborate with these networks as a new person in this movement, and how should social networks be used from an intergenerational perspective?
Thank you so much for that question. I was just here seated and I was just thinking about it. I was like, oh yeah, it's a 30 years experience. It's a 1 year experience. But what I can say about social networks, we should try and use them as should I call it a sword? It should be able to cut the difference between 30 years and 20 years. We should actually use them to be able to, okay, maybe I'm 20, I'm 24, maybe you're 74. But once when you're seated on this podium or this platform, we are all the same. So I feel social networks should just be used to just like cut completely. So we shouldn't be having these intergenerational gaps, especially when you're fighting things like human rights, because it cuts across all the ages. So yeah, something like that. So it should be used as a sword. That's what I think.
Thank you, Nina. And just on that, so you've said that it shouldn't be something that is used as a division, but something that brings us closer together as the different generations. So how would you say the younger generation and you as a team lead of the Abolition Now tour in Kenya, how have you contributed to that movement using the different networks that you have to bring that closeness together and in the fight? And what new strategies have you been able to employ so that we can together fight against the death penalty?
Okay, so shout out to my team. Team Kenya is... So as a team, I'd say we've been able to use this because we've had seminars. We've had a couple of seminars. We've had talks. And when you listen to these talks, you understand that we are all going on the same goal. It's only that we were born at different times of the years, but we are all going to the same goal. If you look at our team, we actually took the strategy of community-based because we came to a conclusion that as much as I'm here at the podium, right, and there's somebody else at home, and then there's somebody else who's now is in prison, the one who's actually on the death row, all of us have different parts to actually play. And when you look at the three, I'm trying to. When you look at the three, we have me who's here, and then the community, and then now the person in the prison. You realize that the person who's in the middle is the person who's in the community. These are the people who have been affected. These are the people who their victims are there. So we came up with a strategy of trying to tell people exactly what is going on. We came into we divided into around three, still on the generational gap, because what I can tell to a university student or how I can try and explain the death penalty to a university student is not the same I can explain to a 10-year-old, you know? So we tried to bring conversations in a way that everybody can be able to understand. So that's the strategy we used, and we saw it working because we even had 10-year-olds actually really interested in the death penalty. Okay, you can't necessarily tell a 10-year-old that people are getting killed and hanged, but at least when you start that conversation, just slowly by slowly, I'm so sure by the time when they're getting maybe to 18, 19, they'll be able to understand it from a background that actually works. So we divided that as a strategy that we actually used, and it's actually working.
Thank you, Nina. And it's interesting that you'd say 10-year-old because I think the first time I personally thought about the death penalty, and I'm trying to remember what triggered it. I think it's something I watched or a book I read where someone had been sentenced to death for a murder. And my first thought as a 10-year-old child was, so we want to kill people to teach the rest of society that killing is wrong. How does that work? It just seems counterintuitive to me that that's what we're trying to do. And I think that's the first time that I thought about the death penalty. And just, as you said, the different people, it comes to us in different ways at different times. Question is, what do we do with that information? Because there are a lot of us who still don't understand. I know, for example, back home in Kenya, we have the death penalty for murder, for robbery with violence, for treason. When you talk to people about the death penalty, they want to think about, oh, it should be there for crimes like rape, it should be there for crimes like terrorism, but the crimes that people want to be punished by death usually are not the ones that are punished by death. So I like that you say that that education and that conversation that we have with that person in the community in the middle, to have them understand, helps us in the journey towards abolition. And I want to thank both our panelists for this time, for this conversation that we've had. I don't know, Lafa, you want to add something before we close this session and move on to the next? And just the one thing that I'd want us to take from here is that it's not for us to effectively fight for abolition. We have to join hands. Whether you've been in the movement for 1 minute or you've been in the movement for 50 years, we're still fighting towards the same goal. So how can we come together and ensure that we become that with beneath each other's wings so that we can propel this movement faster and end up with a society where the death penalty is something that we speak about as something that was there in the past and is no longer there. So thank you so much to our panelists. Makani, you want something to add? Okay.
Do you want to add something?
I just wanted to make maybe a conclusion. And also say this, the same way that you've said it, let's not, as young people, and as older people, I have to say it, so let's not be afraid to use our voice. Sometimes you might go somewhere, especially when we are doing this community-based, and then you say something about the death penalty, and it's a taboo, you know? Nobody wants to talk about it. Everybody is silent, but just one voice, you're just saying, you know, let's talk about the death penalty. It just starts a whole conversation, and it's a whole movement now. So don't be afraid to just speak out. No matter how minute you might think you are, we are all in this together. That's what I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Liba?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I would like to add that we have sort of a natural need for using our voice and empower people to use their voice. For the Francophonians, we have our literature as well, Victor Hugo, and the law wants that the young people will improve what the old ones have already started. So that means that when it's old age, when old age could have done it, and when old age had known, then it would have been possible. So, but the less young generation has not been able to improve the situation, to get the best out of it, and now it's about the young people to really continue the struggle and work on what we have not been able to do, so that we have total abolition, universal abolition of the death penalty all around the planet in all countries. That's what you need to achieve as the younger generation.
Thank you so much, Liwang, and also Nina. You may be seated again in your seat. Thank you so much. It was a great intergenerational talk. Please have applause again for them. Okay. Next, after this intergenerational dialogue, we will talk about new arguments that has been evolved throughout the years and has been discussed and being in debates in the abolitionist communities. So we would like to invite two esteemed speakers here. The first one is Alexius Kamangila to the stage, and also Trey Legal to the stage. Thank you. Please have applause for them. Hello, Alexius. Hello, Trey. How are you? How are you feeling today?
Great. Tired, but great.
Trey, how are you?
I am excellent.
Okay.
Well, good to see you.
So I would like to introduce both of our panelists to the audience first. So Alexius Kamangila is a lawyer and fellow with Reprieve, United Kingdom, and also a lecturer in University of Malawi. So Alexius, can you tell us about how did you start joining the abolitionist movement, and also what is your experience until now?
Thank you so much. A great question. First of all, I would say that my journey has been a journey of hope amidst hopelessness. I think that it's difficult to explain how I joined, but in 1965, so I'm 30 years old, but in 1965, Madison Eva Silombera a political activist against one-party rule during Malawi's cabinet crisis, was arrested and sentenced to death. And in 1966, he was executed. And I wasn't born then, but I learned that he was executed in front of people. And only as I grew up, I learned that he was my great-grandfather. Now, and then fast track in 2021, I experienced a loss of a relative who was murdered. So I want to begin by saying that I've experienced death both from the state and from a criminal. And there's one thing, it's all despicable, it's all painful. There's no difference. Now, how I started my journey and my experience is that the Citizens for Life by the Committee of San Digidio introduced me to the work towards abolishing the death penalty. And my experience has been that in Malawi, for instance, we have been for 30 years without executing. And so the de facto moratorium on the death penalty resulted into a chilling effect, whereby people felt that why should you talk about abolition, because we're not killing anyway. Yet this is not on law, it's de facto, it's not de jure. So at any point, anyone can decide to execute people. But more importantly, people are still being sentenced to death, have been sentenced to death. So you still putting people under what we call death row phenomenon, which is torture. And amazingly, our condition, or badly, our conditions in prisons in Malawi are bad. If you check the news, there have been instances where people in prison have not had food for 5 days, for 3 days, because of the crisis that the country is going through. But my journey has been a journey of learning from other advocates, learning from experiences that I've experienced through my clients as a lawyer representing people under the death row, but learning also from my fellow workmates at Reprieve, from Sandra Babcock, Makwanyan Institute, and all great people that have been working towards abolishing the death penalty. And one thing that I've learned is that the death penalty is something that is supported not out of people's conviction, but it's because of lack of information, it's because of lack of engagement, which, as I indicated, the de facto moratorium on the death penalty fetters that. So my experience remains sometimes painful, because the fight for the abolition can get lonely, in that even people that you're fighting for in terms of abolishing the death penalty can fight you. And it's because of the absence, the gap of information. And I think that's something that I've learned as well, and learning to involve everyone, even those that are not supporting you, just as we have learned from the governor of the US to talk about the abolition, for instance, in Maryland, was together the Democrats and the Republicans. So you need both sides. You need those that support you and those that don't support the death penalty. And how you do that is what is very important.
Thank you very much. That's such your experience, of course, inspired us. And we want to congratulate you for being nominated for the Robert Badinter Public Grand Prix for this year's Congress. Have an applause for our elections, everyone. Congratulations. And I agree with you on how it is important to inform the public and be a part of the opinion and also discourse itself. And I want to highlight one thing that you said that you coordinated a team of lawyers in the Koviwa decision, which resulted in the Malawi Supreme Court of Appeal declaring the death penalty unconstitutional in April 2021, last year, but only to be reversed in August of the same year. How is the experience and what's the condition in your country now?
Thank you so much. I think, first of all, it's humbling to be nominated, because there are amazing people that I've met here, and it's actually embarrassing to be considered as one for this, but I think it speaks volumes to how Raphael, ECM, and all people are considering to put focus on countries that really needs to abolish the death penalty. So I appreciate that. In terms of the Covua decision, Charles Covua versus the Republic, it's a story, it's a case that we can talk for an hour or the whole day, but because I'll need to be as brief as I can, and the first thing that I can say is that big up to Malawi Legal Aid Bureau, a government institution that represents people on the death row. And these are lawyers who are highly overloaded with work, but they still do amazing work. And we work with Chimwemwe Chitope and many other lawyers, including the Director of Legal Aid Bureau. Now, what happened in this case, which is, I think, everyone expecting to hear, is that Charles Covua was a convict that was convicted to death in 2003. And he was convicted under mandatory death penalty, which was that once you sentenced, you convicted, there was no discretion by the court. It was immediately a death sentence. But then in 2007, we had a Francis Kafantaine versus Republic, a decision that declared mandatory death penalty unconstitutional. So this is a convict that had been sentenced under the old law, so he did not benefit the resentencing. Now, he went before the court in 2008, and a great lawyer that we work with, Chitope, argued before the court, and the Supreme Court in 2001, April 28, I was in court that day, declared the death penalty unconstitutional while declaring the mandatory death penalty as unconstitutional. So it basically said, wait a minute, the mandatory death penalty is unconstitutional. But before we talk about the mandatory death penalty, the death penalty itself is unconstitutional. You know, and what happened was that as an advocate, I have a lot of information and years. So we had already known that upon that declaration, the Supreme Court, when it understood what it had done, that it had abolished the death penalty, there were messages that they were going to change the decision because of how things operate, and I think some people felt conservative and they would rather just have, you know, the chilling effect, the de facto moratorium, than to declare the death penalty unconstitutional. Unfortunately, the judge that had written the original judgment, Justice Mwaungulu, who is vilified most of the times, but I think he's a great judge who should be celebrated by CSOs and all of us and as Malawians, was not in the country when they were declaring this decision. So the court went back and reversed this decision in August. What is interesting, and I leave this to academicians, to look at this decision and how it was reversed. There is no law that allows what happened in Malawi. But it happened, and this is the reality of the death penalty. The death penalty is, allowed to go even in an unjust way. Now, in terms of how it affected the movement, first of all, as a person, I was hugely affected because you have spent years of advocacy, and finally, the death penalty is abolished. You know, and you celebrate, you engage the media, and you speak. And Malawi is being celebrated. We received a lot of congratulations. 4 months later, without a legal justification, the death penalty is back. It was bad. But I think one thing that I learned is that in the fight for the abolition of the death penalty, no matter how hard it gets, you get motivation from the fact that you're fighting for life. And we have to fight for life in each and every situation. And I think interestingly, that advocacy that we did in terms of criticizing the Supreme Court, and I think that's one of the things, it was risky. For me, it was risky for my family, it was risky for other people to speak against the Supreme Court. But it was not about individuals, it was about principles. And that's why one thing that is lacking in terms of advocacy and CSOs, because when we criticize judgments, when we criticize decisions of the court or decisions of the state, it's not the individuals and it's not a political party that we're criticizing. It's the principle, it's the decision, it's the office. Yeah, and I think within that context, within that jurisprudence, there was a lot of attention now. People started questioning, and one of it was the Parliament of Malawi. And so they invited us, and we presented why the death penalty was wrong, why we should abolish the death penalty. And that created all sorts of work that has ended up to where we are now, that there's a chance for us to abolish the death penalty. But just to say that when you're doing something good, when you're fighting for something good, even something negative might end up into something positive. And this is a story of Malawi.
Thank you very much on that.
Thank you, Alexis. And you've mentioned that, at least for the movement, you need both those ones who are for you and those ones who are against you. And we know that not everyone understands why we fight against the death penalty. Not even everyone understands what the death penalty is about. And I know one of the arguments you've mentioned that was used in Malawi and has been used even back home in my country as one of the reasons we don't want to, we're taking long to abolish the death penalty when there's that de facto moratorium, is public opinion. What will the public say? Have the public really bought into the idea that we don't need the death penalty? So in your experience, how would you say that how did you overcome the public opinion and get the public to be on your side and support that we do need to abolish the death penalty?
Yeah, very interesting question as well. And let me go back to Nina, what Nina was talking about, young people and the challenge. I think being a lawyer, we are in a profession that respects a lot of seniority. So it's very hard for a young lawyer to sort of talk about things that people don't want to talk about. And sometimes when you're fighting for death penalty, you have to be outspoken. And sometimes it rubs off badly on senior people. And I think one key issue with regard to public opinion has been to ensure that there's a conversation. Because we have learned in Malawi that one of the reasons why what people say that the public support the death penalty, when you engage, it's not really true. And that's why the president of Mongolia yesterday, who was brilliant, indicated something to say, it's about leadership. The abolition of the death penalty is about leadership. So leadership within CSO, but also leadership within the political setup, within the politicians. And in Malawi, what we did, we ensure that we bring back the conversation, the national consultation. So we did workshops in places where the death penalty has been utilized because of heinous offenses. We went into districts, we went into the people to engage. These workshops, we were using the Ubuntu concept. So Ubuntu concept is like Ubuntu. But Ubuntu concept, though not popular, it's broader than Ubuntu because it means humanity. And we use that concept which people associate. So you need to contextualize your arguments. So when we talk about irreversibility of the death penalty, how can you explain irreversibility in a Malawian context? So irreversibility in Malawian context, we were using the Francis Kafantaini decision, whereby because of that decision, all the 160 people had to go back to the court, to the High Court for resentencing. And it happened that, what happened was, because of the need to have mitigating factors, we had to have paralegals who have been doing amazing work. They had to go to the villages to now get the stories of these people that were convicted to death. So all of a sudden, a criminal whose story was just that he murdered someone had a face. He was a father now. He was somebody's brother. He was somebody's friend. They became human. We humanized through their stories. So, and they went back to court, and all 160, none of them was sentenced back to death, which meant that we would have killed 160. So we use that story to say the irreversibility of the death penalty meant we can execute, and we have executed people that are innocent. I can just talk about discriminatory nature of the death penalty. You know, in America, it's about ratio. But in Africa and in Malawi, it's about status, economic status. People that cannot afford a lawyer of their choice, usually they'll face the death penalty. I think one of the things that we did in Malawi is when we created a drama. So from the workshops that I referred to, we went and developed a drama play, and we were airing them on radio. And that also pushed. But above all, we engaged religious leaders, very important and influential. We engaged traditional leaders. Opinion, we had to look at the landscape and look at the policy makers, engage them. Look at the decision makers, engage them. Look at the policy influencers, engage them. And I think when you look at all parts of the society, you're able to reach out. And I think the reality is that the public actually support the death penalty abolition when you engage them. Because you can't talk about the public supporting the death penalty if they are not involved and informed. So an informed position is not a position at all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That it is important that we understand and we take that step to engage and educate the public on what the death penalty is about, what the effect is, and then we can talk about public opinion.
Yes, one of the highlights that you said was it's not only a leadership for politicians or the governments, but it's about community leadership. It's people leadership. And we would like to move to Trey. So I would like to introduce Trey Legal to the audience. Trey Legal has been involved in the abolitionist movement since 2011 with I Am Troy Davis campaign in Georgia. And since then, Trey has actively participated in many actions of Texas death penalty abolition movement and also part of SHAPE, Community Center, Black Alliance for Peace, Results, and also Green Party, and also Animal Rights Committee. So Trey, you are also a part of the Abolition Now Tour delegation like me, but in the United States. So I want to hear from you. So you started your activist day as a human rights activist. And how do you start dwelling into the death penalty abolition, and how do you try to apprehend the relationship between human rights movement and also the death penalty abolition movement?
Greetings. So, like you said, I was first really, I guess, informed about the death penalty. I went to Morehouse College, the College of Martin Luther King Jr., and in the fall of 2011, and that was when they were revving up the campaign to free or to stop Troy Davis's execution. So he was an innocent black man, and there was a lot of publicity, a lot of action behind that. And the campaign was I Am Troy Davis. And as a freshman in college and just kind of growing up black in the USA, you always know about some kind of injustice. But I guess really contextualizing and really getting to like the actual specific aspects of it was something that I was like still learning about as a freshman. So when they executed Troy Davis in September, I just remember it was devastating. We were, I think we were protesting all of that. And I think the I am part of I Am Troy Davis really resonated with me. It was like a spiritual connection. Like if my brother is behind bars, I am behind bars. If my brother dies, a part of me dies. And so we just having that connection, making that connection. So I always say that was like the seed that was planted. Fast forward, I went vegan in 2016 and getting involved in animal rights. And I just remember not really finding a lane in the animal rights. It was just, like I love, I'm an animal rights activist, but also connecting the human animals and the non-human animal oppression together. And so as I was, educating myself, politicizing myself, I was seeking organizations. So I went to Kwanzaa for the first time. Kwanzaa is a Pan-African celebration that it's throughout the diaspora, specifically in the US, to reclaim our culture. And so, and there I found the Texas death penalty abolition movement. And I was like, I'm against the death penalty. And I did not realize that Texas is the leader in the US. By the next 6 states combined, we execute more people. I think in the early 2000s, it was like one every week. Actually, last week, I was protesting an execution in Huntsville, Texas, and then there's gonna be one tonight in Texas. So in Harris County, where I live specifically, Houston, Texas is the killing capital of the US, really the Western Hemisphere. We send more people to death row than any other county in the US and Texas and all of that. So we have a lot going on. So it was just really connecting the different oppressions, we focus on individual acts of violence instead of systemic acts of terror under racial capitalism, under endless war, environmental exploitation, deforestation, so many state-sanctioned murders, and the wealthiest people are the people that are benefiting from these murders. We have 800, the US has 800 military bases across the world. My enemies are not, I don't have 800 countries that are trying to attack me. That is, it is for greed and for profit that the US are doing these atrocities across the world. So to bring it back to the death penalty, it's an extension of the colonial legacy of slavery. The police were born out of slave catchers, and if you did not comply, you were hung, you were lynched. We have a long history of it, like I said, especially growing up black in the U.S. So it was a connection of all things, and I believe that we have to make these connections in order to win the society to abolition. So that's kind of how I got started.
Thank you. I agree with you. Like, your experience speaks for itself that the death penalty movement is not divisional. It's not different with the human rights movement. It's not different than climate justice. It's not divided, but it's all one. We're all here for social change, for social justice. And yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of human rights, we agree that the abolition of the death penalty is also a human rights issue. The death penalty campaign is a human rights issue. But there have been arguments that, there are ways that we can sentence someone to death and then execute them humanely. And it's been argued that, and I know this is used a lot in the States, lethal injection. That is one of the humane ways to execute someone once they have been sentenced to death. So I want to hear your views. Is there really a humane way to execute? If I decide that, fine, I'll use a gas chamber or I'll use lethal injection, does that automatically now changes? I've given them their human rights and dignity by the method that I have executed them?
Yeah, I think ironic is not strong enough of a word to describe the contradiction of saying humane killing. How can you kindly kill somebody who does not want to be killed or who does not want to die? And so, again, going with the animal rights movement, there is this myth of humane meat or humane whatever, dairy or eggs, but it's like the same process. It's the same killing. It's the same exploitation. The Texas Death Penalty Abolition movement, we've actually protested the pharmaceutical companies or company that manufactures the lethal injection or the drugs that they inject the victims of the death penalty. And so I think you cannot humanely kill. Period. It's just a contradiction. And so there's a hierarchy, and one thing that in my work, in conversations and talking to people, is what is human. I was not considered human in the U.S., and to some extent, still not considered human. There's a hierarchy of what is human and animal. So cisgender males are considered human. Then you just go down to women, and then you get down to white women, and then you get to, in the U.S. specifically, people of color, black people, gender nonconforming, gender fluid folks, and so. And then we get to actual animals, and so it's just this hierarchy of who is considered to be a victim. And also, the thing about the death penalty in the U.S. specifically is the racialized nature of who gets to be victimized. There are tons of people. There are tons of murders in our communities, and they don't even get investigated. But let a black man kill a white woman, and it's literally off with his head. And so the humanity, I challenge even the aspect of what do we consider human? What do we, because it has been used historically because we were property. And in the U.S. specifically, and we are still considered to be commodities, especially, if you're poor, if you're disabled, et cetera, et cetera. Who gets the right to be human? And so we have an investment in death. And I want us to get into an investment of life institutions instead of death industries. So,
yes, thank you, Trey. And just as you're talking about it, though, one thing I find interesting is for them to administer the lethal injection, we have to involve doctors, because the doctor is the one who will know how to effectively administer the drug. And doctors are the same ones that take the oath to preserve life. But we are using these doctors again to take away that life. That is also another contradiction. So could you really kill someone humanely?
And there's also a very big legacy of medical racism and exploitation, experimentation on black women specifically, pregnant women, and no anesthesia, like cutting open surgery, and they would use other enslaved women to hold them down to, while they enacted this violence. And this is a part of our history. This is a part of our legacy, and it's still happening. So it is, yes, the fact that the medical industry is also complicit in, the maintenance of the death penalty. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dre, for your experience and also your perspective. We would like to move to Alexius. So, as you know, that there is still this ongoing sentiment and opinion all around the world that the death penalty issue is a third world country or like a global south issue where many of the retentionist countries are locating in the global south, but it is actually not, because it is a global movement itself. It is still happening in many Western blocs or even the United States itself. So how do you localize and translate this global movement into a local campaign and advocacy in your country, Malawi?
No, I think, first of all, the realization and also the sharing of the fact and the truth that life does not see boundary. The right to life is universal, and the need to protect it is important because the right to life is a mother of all rights. You can't enjoy any other right if you do not have life. And so yesterday, someone said something very important. They said, if you cannot allow the state to deny a citizen of the right to freedom of expression, how do you allow the state to deny the right to life, which is a contradiction? And the state killing is something that at a global level, we have to challenge it and realizing that no state sovereignty cannot be equal to killing your own citizens. In fact, it's a weakness to state. It's a challenge. It's a slap to the face of sovereignty, because sovereignty is about protecting your territory, and you can't talk about territory without the people. Now, to think of now, how do we localize the fight against the death penalty? It's a difficult question, because there's been a lot of advancement in other countries, especially Europe, but then there's also been challenges within those countries. We still have challenges in those countries. And one of the challenges that we face in advocacy in Malawi is that you are deemed as a westernizer or someone that is Western integrated, like, you're speaking the language of the West. And so you need to find terminology that fits, that speak to the culture. You need to find the cultural fabric of that community. For instance, in Malawi, you need to go to the history and look at, in the past, how were people dealing with people that have killed people. So you need to find the abolition, the opposition of the death penalty within that cultural context. But also the other thing, I think it's very important how the international organizations work within the country. Somebody said something very important with regard to Saudi Arabia, whereby you support CSOs, but also you're supporting other people in different ways. So the international community, the diplomats have got a platform to help us, local organizations, because they get into spaces that sometimes we can't get into those spaces. And I think bringing the death penalty in every conversation, in everything that mainstreaming the death penalty is very important. I'll give an example in Malawi. So I think it would be injustice for me to leave this platform without talking about victims, because victims is also an important aspect. But before I talk about victims, Amnesty International has been doing amazing work in Malawi in terms of supporting prosecution of cases involving people with albinism. But what Amnesty missed in that access was that they were not looking at the end of that prosecution. They were not putting conditions to say no death penalty. So we saw that Amnesty was actually sponsoring death sentences. The same way other international organizations. So that was a huge contradiction, and it was a big pain for advocates within the country. But that's not to say Amnesty wanted that end, but it's important that interventions should should not miss out. We need to look at everything in context. Now, to talk about our work as well as in localizing, you need to look at the biggest victims of death penalty within your community. So the people with albinism have been greatly affected because there were heinous offenses. And what we did was to go and engage them, understand what justice means to them. And we understood that justice to them means certainty, the three certainties. They want to be sure that there will be certainty and arrest once somebody has been found to have been killed. There will be a certainty of a trial, and then there will be a certainty of a stiff punishment. Death penalty was not a requirement or demand on their part, and that helped us a lot. And I think working with all organizations, especially the victims, we can't leave out the victims out of the equation. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. I agree with you on how there are so many talks on the high-level politics itself and how the government, but at last it is like there are humans at stakes. There are individuals, there are people, there are friends, brothers, sisters like us who are actually sentenced to death, but they're also humans. So it's more about a humanity. It's more about humanitarian. And that leads on to my experience during my abolition tour, that we want to try to humanize the profiles of these people who are death-made inroads, and they're facing this uncertainty. And I believe that when you try to showcase the human side of them instead of the laws, the politics, what's written on the papers, it won't be much, but at least it will show the people that these are what we're helping, these are injustice, and these are what we should change. So moving on to Trey, we have the same abolition tour experience then, and how do you convince the public in the United States or Texas, where your state is, to be a part of these movements? And you may also share your experience of abolition tour itself.
Yeah, it's difficult because people associate the death penalty with safety. And so we have to tackle that ideology. And so to realize that actually it doesn't keep us safe. It's not a deterrent. When it's anti-poor, it's racist, all these different things. And so, but the only way that we can have people listen is through relationship. And so that's one thing. And you don't, what is it? You don't know, it's something about, you have to know that somebody cares about you and it cares about your community. So us just swooping in and just being like, oh, the death penalty is wrong. And it's like, well, what about X, Y, and Z that's going on? And also realizing how it ties to their lives. We spend millions, each case of the death penalty in the US is millions of dollars spent. This is tax dollars, this is our money, and that could be used for so many different things, education, healthcare, food, access, but yet it's spent on death. And so just making those connections with folks, and also with making connections, going to the Abolition Now tour, I'm really, the biggest thing I'm excited about in being here, being present, is building an international network of solidarity. And I really, I would like to, whoever, I want to talk to people, I want to, meet folks, and, eventually see how we can build together. I love hearing your experience about the victories that you have won in Malawi. That's amazing. As being in the movement, it can be kind of, you can burn out on the devastation and the loss and but actually hearing other countries, seeing this country abolished the death penalty, that state did, this, all these different things, or this person got exonerated. So it provides hope. And I hope that in an international lens, I know that we want to abolish the death penalty, or we care about the human rights in other countries. And I just would caution us to approach it in a punitive way, in a, you know, as in literally imposing sanctions on other countries, because the sanctions affect the people, not the, you know, it does affect the government, but it's not, you know, the people who suffer the most are the people who we claim to care about. And so instead, you know, I really admire Cuba for sending, you know, Doctors Without Borders, actually sending aid. If you're concerned about what's going on in the country, you know, let's try to hold each other and uplift each other instead of kind of contradictory or ironically trying to punish in order to stop you from punishing others. So I think that we just have to learn and love. And so I just really appreciate us all being in this space together and being open. So that's my experience.
Thank you, Trey. Thank you, Alexius. And just to pick up from where Trey has finished, to end this session, the one thing that I have picked that I could summarize with is, as we are part of this movement, as we've realized that death penalty issues are human rights issues, the one thing that we need to keep in mind is that we are all seeking justice, not revenge. I think that's the one thing that we need to keep at the back of our mind, so that whether we are talking to someone who is pro or against the death penalty, we need to have that person to understand where we're coming from, and we need to understand where they're coming from, so that we are also putting the humanity in it. And I believe that when people know that we are listening and we're understanding, then they seek to understand us. But when we go into the argument trying to bash, then we're going to be retrogressing. It will not help the movement. So as we go forth, let's remember that we are seeking justice for both the victims and the society at large. We want to get to a win-win situation. So what is that win-win situation? Thank you, gentlemen, for your contributions.
Thank you so much, Alexius and Trey. You may be back to your seat. Thank you so much. Thank you, Trey. Okay, after we talked about the intergenerationality aspect and we have talked about the interdimensional and new arguments, we would love to talk about how to sustain the movement into the future. What are the new means? What are the new innovations that could sustain and continue the movement forwards into the future? So we would like to invite the last two speakers here to the stage. The first one is Ogarit Yunan. Please. Thank you so much. And also, we would like to invite Angelia Prantaman to the stage. Thank you so much. I would just like to read a quick bio on Ogarit and also Angelia. Ogarit, please be seated. Ogarit is a sociologist and pioneering figure of civil society in Lebanon, and you found Lebanese Association for Civil Rights and become a pioneer of the nonviolent movement in the Arab world. Ogarit also founded the University of Nonviolence and Human Rights alongside with Walid Slabi, and also Ogarit alongside with Walid Slabi are nominated this year for Robert Badinter Public Grand Prix in this year's Congress. Have a round of applause for Ogarit. Congratulations on that. And Angelia is a founder of Sebaran Kasih that aims to promote and develop social justice by identifying, building, and strengthening the capacity of marginalized groups. You, Angelia, has a brother, Panir Selvam Prantman, that was sentenced to death in Singapore for drug trafficking. And by then, you have been releasing songs from him and also continue advocating for Sebaran Kasih. Have a round of applause for Angelia, please.
So welcome, ladies, to this panel. And I'd like to start with you, Ogarit. You have been both in academia and in the public fighting against the death penalty. So would you share with us your experience in just starting the abolitionist movement in Lebanon? How was that for you, both in the academic space and in the public space? And what are the challenges, if any, that you faced during that time?
You may speak right.
Immediately. OK. Bonjour à tout le monde. J'ai besoin de hausser la voix.
Hi, everybody.
Ça a été écrit là que je suis.
So I am, as you can read there,
spécialisée sécurité
above
jeunesse.
I'm some specialist for young people and security. I'd like to express myself in English. And I'd like to thank you for this invitation, especially in the context of this movement for young people. 26 years ago, we've started our abolitionist movement, and from then on, our first strategy was to train activists, young people, train the trainers, parliamentarians, deciders. So that was always about training of new people. And we have been training thousands of young people, and most of them really appreciate our work. So we are the trainer of the youth. I say it in Arabic for those who understand this language. Some words that helps sometimes. So for this reason, the new generation, and that's part of our life. We can't just devise life and people in different generations. We are all together, children, adults, senior citizens, and we have to be aware of this fact. And in our fight, when we started 26 years ago, Lebanon was facing civil war. The war was stopped in the 1990s, and afterwards civil society experienced a real renewal, and we decided to start this abolitionist fight. Why? Well, that's not something, some abstract activity or project, but it's because since 1993, 30 years ago, we created the nonviolent movement in Lebanon. And when you found a nonviolent movement in the factories, trade unions, schools, all this fighting for abolishing death penalty, it's just part of this fight. It's within this non-violent culture and philosophy. The state after the war, there were abolished the paramilitary troops. And
chacune a une étiquette.
There were different labels on these paramilitary troops and groups, and in the 50s there was a law stipulating that those who kill will be killed. And the judges had no say in that, no role. So in 4 years, we had 14 executions because this law was reapplied after the 90s. So that's horrible for a country like Lebanon. So one injustice towards one person is like an injustice committed towards everybody. And we had many problems, but we have been fighting a lot. And until today, the abolition is not a priority, but we started, and of course there are many things. It's a very complex phenomenon. The abolitionist fight was a first in Lebanon and in the Arabic world in the way it was planified, because it was planified in order to launch a culture of revolution, for abolition, sorry. So that's why, on a parallel level, we worked in schools, we've trained parliamentarians, we took to the streets, and we saw these corpses, we had theater shows, and we went into prisons, we went into some prisons as activists. And also, we visited the families of those who experienced death penalty, in order to show others that non-violence is very important. And the families of the victims of this first crime, so was not very happy to receive us. So those who had a family member who was killed by some perpetrator. So some families accepted to receive us, to see us, to meet up with us, and
aussi deux, trois choses.
I would like to take one concrete example. So, some man had his son killed by some perpetrator, and he wanted death penalty for the perpetrator. So he didn't want to see us, but we spent hours before just at his door. And after the execution took place, we visited him again, and he was waiting for us. And he looked so unhappy and sad, and he was crying, and he said, "Hi, I must tell you something. Please make yourself comfortable. I was wrong. If I would have been braver, if I would have been listening to you, I wouldn't feel so guilty today. I lost my son, another family lost his son, and there are two corpses now, so that's not justice." That's not justice. So these are examples, and we have so many examples of this kind. So you create a situation in society in order to change the mentalities and to open up the view of people who think that it's not by being violent that you can resolve problems. And each time we talk with children or adults, they always change their minds. Awareness raising is so powerful. And one session of awareness raising at school, first they say, "Oh yes, I'm in favor of death penalty," but afterwards they say, "I didn't know what it means. I didn't know I'm complicit of killing people." And they do not want to live in a state which kills. And it's not only the decision makers, it's ourselves, it's everybody, the whole country is complicit. And also, the perpetrator is not the one who should dictate my way of resolving problems. He kills, I kill. That's not possible. You can't just imitate these people. That's not a possible choice. I'm not going to kill. I don't agree. And I'm against the act of killing, especially when it's the state which kills depending on its interests and priorities. So That must be stopped, and that must be a priority for every country. And we decided in 1987 to launch a campaign in Lebanon. And in 1988, after 14 executions, we took to the streets for the first time on a public square where two young convicts were executed, and one of them was innocent. It was a huge public square, and thousands of people were watching. We were wearing black clothes, and we were asked, what are you doing there in black clothes? And our slogan was, and our founder created the slogan, a slogan which touched everybody. We are very sad because of the victims of the first crime and of the second crime. That's why we are mourning. And that slogan was everywhere, and on TV and everywhere. And we are those who launched the non-violent movement, and also because the Lebanon, after civil war and this much violence, stop violence, stop state violence on behalf of the people. And we had to launch such this abolitionist culture this way.
Thank you, Ogarit, for sharing that experience. And as I was listening to you, the one thing maybe that came to my mind, there's a quote that Raphael said yesterday from Mozart, that, you know, the most important and difficult part of music is the tempo. And from your story, what I'm getting is you are setting the tempo for the abolitionist movement in Lebanon. That by training these trainers, by getting people to understand what it means, by getting people to see that it was just perpetuating that cycle of violence, you're able to create that tempo that is enabling the movement to continue to this date. And just as you came from that point, I don't know, now as you've mentioned about the challenges, you mentioned about the experience, how are you able to sustain the cause? Because I don't think it might be that easy. So how are you able to sustain it in terms of ensuring that you had the human resources that you needed, you had the finances that you needed? How were you able to sustain that movement to what it is today?
Yes,
it's also a time question. If you plan for something, if you plan something, if you plan a struggle, you have to have a strategy, you have to have a vision. You have to study time. The time must be ripe for that struggle. So you need this big strategy behind, and it's the ambassador of the European Union in Lebanon said this is exceptional, this is absolutely extraordinary. So how do we continue? What have we done since? So it seems we are still important. I laugh about that a bit, but we have the courage. And several persons talked about the courage that it takes in order to make a decision. The president, or ex-president of Mongolia spoke about that. Other responsible person spoke about the courage that it requires. But it's not only courage of one person, it's also the courage for the activists to be brave to go into the street against the law. What is the law? The law is not justice. In most cases, unfortunately, you have to listen to your conscience. You have to think about the role. The founder of that concept of civil obedience, he said, it's our conscience that is the supreme law. So this is what we should follow. And if it's done by lots of persons, it may contradict justice. You have to obey, first of all, to your conscience, and then to the law that we have in our states. That's our responsibility. That's our responsibility to stand up right against something that is not right. And all that requires courage of the activists, of the founders, of the movements, of young people, of everybody who is implied, everybody who's committed. We have lots of challenges to overcome, but personally, I have never ever really thought about challenges. When you work every day, you struggle every day, and when you see successes, progress, in the same way, everybody together, and you unite all the means, it's in the non-violent movement. Then we need to think about what does it take to make sure that the entire society is happy about the abolition, even those who are still in favor of the death penalty. So they want to see that something has changed in this country. They have changed society itself that has been destroyed during the Civil War. We are hardly at the beginning of a new start in our society, in our state, so we need to change the law, which still says that those who kill need to be killed. And we have created a lobby activity for 3 years and 11 months with the Minister of Justice and the members of parliament. We had discussions, 2 hours with each member of parliament, and several have been able to convince that being in favor of the death penalty is not as good as being in favor of abolition. So we have presented a proposal for a new law, and 94% of the members of parliament voted for the abolition. So that was the first victory in 2001. And we had a very important musician in Lebanon who created a song for abolition, and it was sung in front of the parliament. There is a Lebanese member of parliament present here today. We were in front of the parliament building. There was a big rally, and inside the members of parliament voted against the abolition of that law, and we sung outside, and we were successful. And when the society saw, even those activists saw that you can change, and you can change not only law, but also people's minds, that has given us extraordinary force, and has given the movement a lot of force. And a coalition has been formed afterwards, more than 80 political parties and groups in a small country as Lebanon. Thousands of people have supported us and have been on our sides, and of course there have been challenges. There are still some people against, and they're against us. Even in the religious circles, political parties. So we have had something very strong, which has given this society force and strength. And then we go into schools. We introduce that into schools. And this University for Nonviolence has been founded only recently. And I can tell all of you that it's the first university, academic university, with that specialization of master's courses on non-violence, the first in the world. It was created in a country like Lebanon, with lots of conflicts, of course, but also surrounded by countries that are still in war. So we've seen that good strategy, and it's a good strategy that helps you to advance. So the challenges, I don't see any challenges really, because every day we work, we struggle. It's work and love that makes us go forward.
I think what moves me the most is, of course, there are layers of hard work, but it is all about courage. It's all about the strength. It is all about the bravery and the dauntlessness to sustain a movement. And it's really a reflection on how to continue moving forward. And that moves us to Angelia. How did you find the courage? And when did you find it? And how did you start this Sebaran Kasih and the whole advocacy for abolition of death penalty?
Hi, everyone. First of all, from bottom of my heart, I would like to thank ECPM, EDPAN, and 8 World Congress Committee for inviting, investing, and arranging for us to be here today to join this important event. The team have been excellent and really patient with me, and I'm very truly grateful for that. So My biggest motivation to start Sibaran Kasih is my brother Panir Selvam. Panir himself is an idol for me because of his courage to have a vision even when he's at the darkest place on earth and at the lowest point of his life. Even though Panir's days are numbered, he has a big vision to create awareness for the abolishment of death penalty in my country, Malaysia, through music and art campaign. APJ Abdul Kalam, a hero space scientist and a former president of India, once says that having a small aim is a crime. One must have a great aim and a grand aim. So memorized by Panir's idea, art and aim, myself and my friend Surya back in my country, and also with another help of my colleague, Pastor Prince John, we have officially made an arrangement to create the NGO. And we advocate for the abolishment of death penalty through songs, storytelling campaigns. For example, we produce and release songs, poems written by Panir Selvam. Consequently, we gain some attention from media and manage to access a bigger platform by giving radio interviews. We consistently voice out our support and urge government to stop any scheduled execution by neighbor country by writing an article to press, doing short doing short documentary and movie with other human rights NGOs and lawyers. We shared real-life experience of the inmates and also get involved in campaign to support the abolishment of death penalty by other NGOs. In fact, we have even organized a fundraising and donation events on behalf of Panir Selvam and other death row inmates. So I would like to ask everyone a question. I believe that everyone have a brother. So can you tell me which is difficult, like to born with a brother or to born as a brother? I didn't know the answer as well. But this question made me to think from the shoe of my brother. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. That was very inspiring. So I agree with you on how that it needs to be there is a need to showcase that there is a human way. There is humans behind the death penalty itself. And one of the things that has been discussed in the communications for non-profit sector is how to change the narrative itself, like from the devastating news of death penalty day by day we receive to a hope-based communications where we try to advocate and give a tint of hope in every message that we have. Currently, I did my research. Sibaran Kasih currently has more than 178,000 social media engagement, 9 NGO collaborations, and also the songs by Panir has been listened by thousands of people. That is very much amazing. What would you say are the most influential methods in changing these narratives from the sadness, from the devastation that you and everyone else and Panir experiences, and how that narrative convinced the general public towards the abolition in Malaysia and around the globe?
Thank you for the question. So I would say that entertainment, music and art can be the most influential method in changing the perception of public towards the inmates first, and then the subject matter as a whole. I think that the language and the message that the data, the graphic, the figures that we sometimes employ for this cause is detached and impersonal. So do the government and the public really understand the language of the death row inmates? Do they pay attention to the loneliness, the evil and the sorrows that the inmates is going through? So music and the art have the ability to convey the deep message of life and how reality, the poor death row inmates without any restrictions with this music campaign in a peaceful way. So people from all walks of life have an opportunity not to just read about the death row inmates, but to hear the music, experience the art that they have created to understand and visualize the suffering and the loneliness of these inmates that are just waiting to die in the hands of the state. Nobody stumble over a big rock and fall down. It's always something small, a small rock, a small rain that makes us fall down. We did not pay attention to the small things that actually can change our life. So the involvement of local artists and celebrities have also played a huge role in changing the perspective of this issue in the eyes of the government and the public. They have more clouds with them, so more fan base with them, and we can better cultivate the understanding of this serious issue in changing the way we approach this issue. One really good example would be climate change that I can give, a global warming cause. While the urgency is great, the message for the cause was taken far wide by actor Leonardo DiCaprio and activist Greta Thunberg. So we need Leo and Greta to advocate for the abolishment of death penalty, and like our gentlemen here that have just sing song. So we need more people like him to advocate for the abolishment of death penalty.
Thank you, Angelia. And you've said that we need all these people for the movement to work. So all the contemporary methods that you've said we use the music. We've seen 178,000 social media engagements. And all these have helped a lot of people in your country to learn about the movement and know how to join in. So how would you say that these methods, these new methods, the contemporary, using the art, using social media, using music, how have they contributed to the growth of the abolition movement through Sebaran-Kasi and in your country? Yes.
Thank you. Through sharing real-life experience via pictures, video in social media, we gain supporters from on national and global scales. A few of our events are more with families of death row inmates that have approached us. After a few of our events, many of the family, some of them have approached us and have shared their story instead of being a passive observer. So we can get few to now actively participate in our event as well. So furthermore, with music and art, we are getting more attention from media, from the press. When we look back in my country, so we are relatively unconcerned to cover on the death row issues, unless someone is getting executed or somebody's execution is coming up soon. So all this awareness, as well as the technology and social media, help to build a community around this serious issue. For example, I recently attended an abolishment campaign organized by various human rights NGOs, and it was all done remotely with people and members from public and from neighboring countries to join this show to support them. So on the other hand, staying active on social media and doing effective activism also provides Sebaran-Kasi more opportunity to promote our human rights works, and we get to share ideas and growing our network, and also manage to get some sponsors internationally to produce music written by Panir Selvam. So all in all, I think the problems remain same, but we can change the character of the problem with our response and attitude by thinking outside of the box.
Thank you very much. I agree with you on thinking outside of the box, as it also allows us to have innovations and also new ways to sustain the movement itself. Thank you so much, Angelia.
If you don't mind, I have a poem written by Panir. Can I read?
Yes, sure.
Okay, yeah. The title of this poem is Death Row Literature. This poem was written on 27 April 2022, this year. It's dedicated for Nagendran, a Malaysian citizen that was mentally disabled and was executed by the government of Singapore without mercy, despite global call to halt the execution. So this poem was written 2 hours before the execution. A tragic vision of purposeful blindness, the premonition of death descending, like the dark shadow of night upon the day. Concrete walls of hates build up blood, decorated by crude handprints, like a symbol of desperate plea from an extended hand of a disabled mind. An exhausted soul of a mother seeking refuge for her son, which has been refused, is a trace of urgency on the shades, as if there is a hidden message engraved on the wrinkle of those haunted palms, as though it seeks the voice of a messenger. To speak this dead row literature has the last hope for the future and its last sign before its last lost in its last sleep. Handcuff, shankles, chain, black wheels, trapdoors, little chambers executioner, devoutly sung a murderous chorus as if cheering for the evil to take its form. Enticing dead row to breathe through the sorrow of loved one, to roam and dwell, at the end of the venomous needle, at the circle of a knot cord, at the edge of a sharpened sword, it resides inside the bullet shield. It sees nonchalantly if an invisible ruler. At the turn of an electric chair, to dissemble and devour, to stretch flesh and soul of a thing that just a second ago was called the human being. Every life is a scar. The death penalty isn't a silver bullet. Let's not make it a secret. Advocate of death, greedy for more dead bodies, adamant to call for more blood to pour, telling killing is a cure to keep the state pure. They say there is a freedom of expression here. We ask, is there freedom after the expression? We can't change the past, but the present is the future past. So it's about the time for us to act fast. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigelia. I'd like to say thank you very much to Nigelia and Olga for sharing your experiences. And to conclude this session, you have one message? Sure. Sorry, yes, please.
Yes,
final message.
You have a message. I would like to say a few words. Lebanon is an exceptional country. There are many negative situations, but it has much to give. And in Lebanon, there is the past, there is the future. After starting the fight, it's a country, and its history is the history of a country which develops abolition, and there's already a bill because Lebanon is going to abolish death penalty shortly, and we are going to introduce a bill. And during the next Congress, you're going to congratulate us. We are going to be maybe the first abolitionist country in the Arab world. And also, I would like to say hello to the young people here, the courageous young people, and I would like to transmit the torch. There are new youngsters here, very committed and very active, and I'd like to tell you that Lebanon is still facing the problem of confessionalism, meaning religious divisions. And when it comes to death penalty, the last executions in 2040 in Lebanon, because there's a moratorium of 18 years. In 2004, there were executions because there was always one Christian and one Muslim which was executed in order to have a balanced situation. So this is anchored in the Lebanese system. Thank you very much. You are young, you are very committed. I'm very happy you invited me to the ECPM, to this session with so many young people. Thank you very much.
So I guess to conclude the session, the message is that raising awareness and educating younger generations about the abolition of death penalty means we, as all abolitionist movement, is taking a step back just to have a reflection and showing that there are other options and approaches to the capital punishment abolition from multiple ways, such as like creating a certain curriculum in a university or a digital communications campaign with many activism and social media posts. And I guess this is very much necessary in all countries with long history of abolition, and it is because the subject still gives us heated debates and also particularly awake in tragic events. Thank you so much again, Angelia. Merci beaucoup already. You may be back to your seat as we conclude this event.
As they take their seat, just one thing to close this session. Three things that I'd want us to stay, if we could just take our seats, there's one last thing before we end today's session. Three things that I'd want us to go away with from this session as key takeaways. Number one, that it is important for us to build strong relationships and networks within the human rights movement and adopting structures that are both multisectoral and intergenerational. So as we are all here, let's network, let's build that network that would help us to grow. Number two, the research and innovative arguments. Let's continue researching and thinking outside the box on how we can make this movement be sustainable for the long haul. And finally, let's commit to supporting and building the capacity of the young abolitionists, even as they continue in this fight. And on that note, we want...
Before we start that, there is one more information that you've heard from Trey, you've also heard from Nina, you've also heard from me about the Abolition Now Tour experiences. We just want to inform you that to learn more about the initiatives of the Abolition Now Tour and their next steps, the ways forward, there is a follow-up workshop or open meeting that will happen tomorrow here in Hall Radio System from 15:15. So if you want to learn more and hear from us about our actions and our next priority actions, the next steps, and you want to give inputs, you want to give feedbacks to our work, you may free to attend.
Yes, thank you, Kam. And now, the Kenyan delegation of the Abolition Now Tour have a presentation that they want to make to all of us. And they will be doing a dance choreography to music that is put together by various Kenyan artists and produced by the Permanent Presidential Music Commission of Kenya. And I'd want to welcome the Kenyan delegation of the Abolition Now Tour on stage.
Thank you. And I just want to say that this is not only them performing, but if you want to follow the dance and you want to just move to the beats and to the grooves, you are very free to dance, and you may stand up from your seat, and let's fight for abolition through this performance. Thank you very much.
everyone. Hello, everyone. I want us to dance together to this song. I'm gonna teach you. Find a partner. Make sure you're seated. You're standing right next to someone. Everybody stand up. It's gonna be easy. It is gonna be easy. So you step to the right and clap with your neighbor. Step to the left, clap your neighbor. Step to the right, clap your neighbor. If you have someone in front, if you have someone to the back, and then we do this, all of us, together, isn't it? Okay, let's try. Sound engineer. Ensure you have someone next to you, a partner. We start to the right. Let's go, DJ. This song is produced by PPMC, that is Permanent Presidential Music Commission of Kenya. It acknowledges all the heroes, and I believe everyone here is a hero, isn't it? So together, let us dance to the song.
Simama, Wakenya wote simama. Simama, wewe shujaa, simama.